In P3 shed walls for your SketchUp shed, there is an element that is somewhat new in the modeling techniques, and that's adding this opening in the sheathing for where the window would be built. This is similar to creating the core openings in the CMU from P1, but there's a little bit of a difference in that these components are already created and you need to edit the component instead of just editing a series of edges and surfaces before it's turned into a component. So on your Educat page, in the additional resources section, there's a P3 practice exercise. And this will download a SketchUp file that looks like this. And this is just a partial wall layout with a window opening in it. So go ahead and get this file opened. Pause the video until you're ready to go and orbit your window so you're in about this position. To begin, open your Components panel in the default tray and select the house icon. This will show you the components that are used in the model to build this particular section. This piece of sheeting, you can open Entity Info and see that it is the 1/2 inch 4x8 OSB, which is this component. Now I don't want to write over this particular component because in most of my models I'm going to want to have what I would refer to as my base OSB. So my 1/2 inch 4x8 OSB that I can always go back to. So I'm going to make this a unique component. Remember that in order to make a unique component, you do have to have 2 identical instances in your modeling window. So I'm going to select this sheeting, choose the Move command, and make a copy. And I'm just going to make a copy somewhere out here. The location doesn't matter. I'm going to make sure that I have the original OSB selected before I make unique, because I don't want to have to move this sheeting. So I'm going to right click on here and say make unique. This creates the copy or the OSB number 1 in the components dialog box. And for the sake of this exercise, I'm just going to call it with window. Okay. And that, because I'm highlighted on here, it just attached it to my mouse. Tap the space bar on your keyboard or escape and that'll get rid of it. I'm going to go ahead and delete this regular OSB also. I don't need that on there anymore. Okay, so that's getting you ready, that you've got your copy now. So what I need to do is cut a hole right here. And the really important thing to remember is that when you're editing a component, just like when you're editing the size of a stud or a joist, you have to double click that component in order to make the change. You have to do this here as well. So your first step is to double click on the OSB to activate. So now we're working just on this piece of OSB. It's handy that the studs and other framing components are grayed out because we're going to use the endpoints on these studs as our reference points. We're going to draw a rectangle at the inside edge of these framing components so that we can separate this surface and push-pull the surface out to create the window opening. So the first step is creating a rectangle using the rectangle tool in your toolbar. And you can zoom in as close as you need to. And if you have to orbit, that's fine. You want to find this endpoint, and you'll notice on that little green node it says endpoint outside of active. That simply means that you're choosing an endpoint that is not on the active component. However, we know that it's an intersection because this OSB is sandwiched right up to those stud components. Now the next thing I want to do is make sure that I stay on this blue plane because I'm going to start orbiting to get to the opposite corner. So I'm going to tap the up arrow on my keyboard to lock the blue plane. It changes the color of that blue plane from a light blue to a dark blue. And now I'm just going to orbit around until I can see the opposite corner at the sill and jack stud. So right here again, endpoint outside of active, click once to place the rectangle. Now, nothing spectacular or magical happened on my screen. There is now a rectangle drawn at the edges. Because there are edges there, we cannot see them. I'm going to tap spacebar on my keyboard to exit the rectangle tool. When I click once on this OSB inside the window, you can tell, because this is highlighting and this is not, that this is now a separate surface. So my next step is to push this surface out to create the opening in the OSB. So with this surface highlighted, I'm going to choose push-pull. The push-pull command, I'm going to push this out until I get the on face node, and then you can see, because I have the horizon back here, that the hole was cut. I can hit the space bar on my keyboard to deactivate the push-pull command, and then just click outside of that component anywhere to deactivate the component. And you can see here, both here that you have the window, but also in your thumbnail, you notice that this OSB component that we called with the window has the opening, so you can very easily see which one that is. So I think the biggest thing to remember for students that are just doing this the first time is that you have to double click that component before you draw your rectangle. Otherwise, what you're doing is drawing a rectangle on top of an existing component and then trying to push-pull, and that's not going to work. You're not cutting anything, you're just adding to it. As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know.